In this video, we're going to look at the idea of a sidechain source coming in at oscillator number 1. I've programmed a basic sound here within Sculpture, which is sitting on track number 2, and we're going to use that as a kind of percussive sound within Ultrabeat. Let's hear it first of all. Okay, so that sound goes on for a really long time. You can see how long the region is. So what I want to be able to do in real time is to offer little snatches of that sound in to Ultrabeat. So the first thing I'm going to do is to send it to an auxiliary bus. So I've changed its output routing. I'm then going to turn off the stereo output at bus number 1 so that that sound isn't making any noise anymore. So if I now run that sequence, you can see that it's making a noise internally. We just can't hear that sound anymore. So you can see the level meters but hear no sound. And then what I'm going to do is to just choose a sound that I'm perfectly prepared to sort of sacrifice. So I want to be able to run the sequence with some other drums, but I don't want this particular drum. So I've selected one here that I can live without. And what I'm then going to do is to route the sidechain source in here instead. So I'm obviously going to just lose this sound, but that's okay. So what I need to do first of all is to select the sidechain source within oscillator number 1, which is up here. And then what I need to do is to select the actual source inputs that I want, which is obviously going to be bus 1, which is where I've sent my Sculpture sound. So what that now means is that I should be able to hear that sound when it's triggered. But in order to be triggered, what I need to do, obviously, is to have that sequence running. So I need to be in playback mode. I need to press play within Logic. And what that will do is obviously trigger the Sculpture sequence. And then I'll be able to hear it. If I just try and play this sound without the trigger running, it's just not going to make any noise. So what's happening now is that when I press play and I trigger that note, I can hear tiny little snatches of it, which of course are dependent on the envelope shape. So if I open the envelope up, I can hear that sound for longer, and obviously I've got the option of whether or not I want the sound to sustain via the sustain button or not. So I can just choose a shape for the sound if I want to. So I can zoom in on this sound within the envelope if I want to make more subtle changes. So once I've got my sidechain trigger into Logic in this way, what I'm then in a position to do is to start programming a sequence for it, which incorporates that sound, as well as using other drum sounds as well. So I'm going to create a 1-bar pattern, and all I have to do is to remember that my sidechain sequence is at A1. So obviously any notes I program for A1 are going to trigger that note, whereas the other sounds will obviously trigger different drum sounds within Logic. So I'm going to start with a kick sound here on C1 and go through and just put together a really basic little sort of loop. So I can build that sequence incorporating notes at A1, and then I can press play and hear what that sounds like. Now, of course, the great thing is that because the sequence is evolving, that triggered note at A1 is going to be different each time. Now, of course, if I want to change the sound quality of the sidechain source, I could go into Sculpture, make some changes there, or apply effects processing to it. But what I can obviously still do as well is to process the sound within Ultrabeat. So I can route the sound into the filter, set up some effects on it, change its envelope shape, and experiment with different parameters here. So obviously that's much more prominent than it was before. I can even set up LFOs. So let's just choose an LFO shape here, and let's route that into the filter to get the sound wobbling and changing in various ways. there's a random LFO working its magic on the cutoff frequency. So that's how you route in a sidechain source, and how you can begin to process it within a single voice of Ultrabeat as well.